In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to convert color pictures to black and white using the Nik Silver Efex Pro Photoshop plugin. In one of my earlier tutorials, I showed you how to do black and white conversions using Adobe Lightroom, using only the built-in controls in Lightroom instead of using a plugin. And it does a pretty good job, except that it still suffers from a lot of the same problems that you normally have when you try to convert color to black and white on the computer. And that problem is very flat-looking tonality, especially in the midtones. When you convert a picture to black and white, if you try to increase the contrast to solve that problem, you end up blowing out the highlights and blocking out the shadows and still not having enough separation in the midtones. And so a lot of photographers turn to using plugins that are designed for black and white work, and what these plugins do is they increase local contrast in the middle tones in order to bring about the kind of tonal separation that you can get when you shoot black and white film. And these actually work really well. This is how I do most of my own work on the occasions when I convert a color picture to black and white. The one that I'm going to show you today is Nik Silver Efex Pro. And this one was bought a few years ago by Google, and Google continued to charge, I think, about $150 for this plugin, along with several others that came bundled with it, until very recently when they decided to start giving it away for free. Now, they've recently said that they're going to stop supporting it. In other words, there's not going to be any more updates to it. But I still think it's a valuable one to use because it gives really beautiful results and it's very easy to use. And so as long as it continues to work with the current versions of Photoshop, I see no reason not to keep using it, especially given the price, which is, you don't get any better than free. And unlike a lot of other free things, this one is not a case of you get what you pay for. The software really does work very well. So here's a photograph that we're going to work with. This is a sunflower field here in northern Indiana, real close to where I live. It's about maybe 25 miles west of the city of Fort Wayne where I'm at. We go under the filter menu in Photoshop, Nik Collection, Silver Efex Pro 2, and wait for it to open up. Alright, when you open the screen you see the picture and it looks real flat and too gray here. We'll correct that in a minute. On the side here, on the left side, you'll see a preset library, and there's all kinds of presets you can choose from, pretty much all of which give very ugly results. So we're going to not use those. We're going to start out with the neutral setting. And then we'll go over here to the actual adjustments where we can make our own changes to the tonality. Now, if we scroll down here a little bit, one of the things that you can do is it has a built-in emulation for different types of film. If you're trying to get results that are similar to a film that you like to use, like Kodak Tri-X or Ilford HP5 or whatever, there's a long list of films here you can choose from. And if you choose one of them, just scrolling through the list, you don't even have to click on them. You'll see that the picture changes quite a bit with each one that we choose. Some of these actually do a pretty good job of emulating the look that you get with those particular films. It not only adjusts, let's go ahead and choose the Delta 400 one here as an example. It not only gives you the emulation of the grain that film has, but it also adjusts the color sensitivity to be similar to that, because different black and white films are sensitive to color in different ways. Color films have to be pretty much equally sensitive to all colors in order to give accurate color reproduction. Black and white films are often more sensitive to blue than they are to red or yellow, although there's exceptions to that. So each manufacturer has created their own sensitivity profile for their black and white film. And why that's important is if people say, well, it's black and white, who cares what the color sensitivity is? Well, when you photograph colored objects in black and white, let's say you photograph something that's red, like a red barn, and let's say the film that you're using is less sensitive to red than it is to blue. Well, it's a red barn against a blue sky. So the result would be that the red barn is going to be darkened because the film is not as sensitive to red, and the blue sky will be lightened because the film is more sensitive to blue, and so you have a situation where the sky is going to be light and the barn's going to be darker than might be what you wanted. And so another film that has higher red sensitivity and lower blue sensitivity might give you a darker blue sky and a lighter red. And so with black and white films, you would choose films based on which one's color sensitivity you liked best. When you're converting a color picture to black and white on the computer, you can adjust that color sensitivity on a per image basis. And these emulations for the different film types are designed to emulate the color sensitivity of that actual film. And for some of them actually give pretty decent looking results. You can adjust them yourself if you wish to. If you want to make it less red sensitive, you can see how it's darkening and lightening the centers of the sunflowers, which are actually kind of a brown color, but brown is actually a dull red or a dull orange, depending on the shade of brown it is, or a dull yellow. If you took red, yellow, or orange paint and you mixed it with its complementary color on the color wheel, you would get a brown color. And so that's what brown really is. It's really a dull, warm color. And so by adjusting the red, you can adjust how brown things render. And you can see what I'm doing here on that. Adjusting the green really doesn't affect the leaves as much as you would think it would, because you would think they're green leaves. It should make a big change. Plant leaves actually have quite a lot of other colors within that green. It's not a real pure green. It's kind of a darker, less saturated green on most plant leaves, and so adjusting the green doesn't really affect it as much as you would expect it to do so. Now, if we look at the yellow, the petals on the sunflowers are yellow. They're bright yellow, and so we can expect a big change by adjusting the yellow sensitivity. Now, if you don't want to mess with this stuff, you really don't have to. You can leave this alone. You can choose one of these film emulations and stick with the color sensitivity it gives you. Or you could even not use the film type simulations at all, just go to their neutral setting, which sets all of them at 0. And for a lot of things, that actually gives pretty decent results if you adjust the contrast settings up here well. And so let's look at these, because these are going to be the most important settings for what we're going to do. And there's 3 different settings here: brightness, contrast, and structure. And then below that is tonality protection. And what these do is, if you increase contrast too much, you take the risk of maybe blowing out the highlights or causing the shadows, the dark areas, to go so dark you don't see detail. So by using these tonality protection sliders, it prevents that from happening. So the brightness, I'm not going to mess with that on this one, because I don't think that the brightness really needs adjusted. Let's do the contrast first. Contrast is the overall contrast of the picture. So you can see by doing this, we're darkening the darks, lightening the lights. So the light sky is going lighter, the dark stuff in here in the shadows is going darker. The problem with increasing the contrast too much is you might push this white sky into being so white that there's no tone left in it. It may end up being pure paper white when you print it. You don't want that to happen. You want a little bit of tonality in there, even though it's a flat white sky. You also don't want to lose detail in these darker areas. You want to be able to see the detail in there. And so let's dial our contrast back a little bit and look at the structure slider. The structure slider actually increases local contrast. The contrast slider adjusts global contrast. Global contrast is the overall contrast in the image, and that's the one that would push the lights real light and the darks dark. Local contrast is adjustment that increases difference between tones that are very close to each other tonally, so that you have more separation between adjacent tones. But it doesn't push the lights too light or the darks dark the way that the contrast slider does. Let's go ahead and try it and see what the effect actually looks like. And you can see here that as we change this, you're not seeing these dark areas go much darker, and you're not seeing the sky go much lighter, but you're seeing lots of contrast increase in the midtones. And that's what we want, because that corrects the main problem that we have with converting a color picture to black and white, and that is that lack of contrast in the midtones. And you can see here I'm using the neutral film setting, so none of this stuff has been adjusted for color sensitivity, and the grain stuff hasn't been adjusted. Using the neutral setting gives you basically no grain added, and that's actually what I prefer. I know there's a lot of people who like to add grain to their black and white pictures that they convert from color digital images in order to look like film. I don't like to do that. I think it looks ugly. Not that grain is ugly. It looks beautiful on film. I just think it looks ugly on a digital picture because it's not natural. It's not supposed to be there. So I prefer to leave the grain turned off, but if you do wish to do that, you can I'll show you in a few minutes how to adjust that to get the different types of grain. So most of the time, by adjusting the contrast and the structure, you can actually get a pretty good tonal setting. Now I think that some of these darker areas may need to be lightened just a bit. So if we go to tonality protection for shadows, and that's this slider right here, as I slide it, you can see that the shadow areas are opening up. They're lightening up so we can see more detail within. The highlights, I really wish the software had a readout of the actual color numbers so that we could tell if this was blown out or not, because I can't really, it's hard to judge just by looking at it on the screen. But I have a feeling that this really is probably a little too light, so I might increase the highlight protection a bit and kind of tone that down a little. And I think what I got here actually looks pretty nice. If we go down here to the film types area here, we can adjust the sensitivity to different colors if we wish. If I wanted to make those yellow petals lighter, I can do that without really affecting the tones of other things in the picture. Now if this picture had a blue sky, reducing the blue would darken the sky, which some people like on blue sky pictures. Helps make clouds and such stand out. That's not really going to do anything for us on this. I shot this on a day where the sky was pretty white. So let's look at the grain settings for those of you who want to do that. If we click the zoom button up here to zoom in 100%, wait for it to render here. Now we can see a close-up detail of the picture, and we can see there's no grain. Now this is kind of unintuitive the way this is set up. It says grain per pixel, and the setting I have here is 500. You would expect a high number like that to be really grainy, right? And a low number to be not very grainy? Well, no, it's the opposite on this software. If I reduce the grains per pixel to a lower number like 242, this takes a few seconds to render, and I've got a good fast computer too, but it's kind of slow software. Once we see this render, now we can see it looks really grainy. If I reduce it even further, wait for it to process, whoa, that really looks grainy. That's like using a 3200 speed film. Now, in addition to the grains per pixel setting, and remember 500 is no grain, so if you want no grain, push it all the way to the 500. In addition to the grains per pixel setting, then there's another setting here, soft and hard. If we push this up to the hard side, the grain becomes not really bigger, but just sharper looking. Kind of like the effect of using a high Accutance film developer like Rodinal. Now if we were to lower it down to soft, then the grains would look a lot softer. The picture itself would look a little bit less sharp because the grain is being softened. It's kind of like using a fine grain developer with black and white film. Now if you have the grains per pixel pushed all the way up to 500 because you don't want to see any grain, it really doesn't matter where you have the soft hard thing set. It's not going to affect it at all. So that can be anywhere if we're not using the grain. In addition to those settings, we also have, I'm going to zoom back out here, there's a curves adjustment just like in Photoshop, so you can adjust contrast and brightness using the curves if you prefer to do that instead of using the brightness and contrast controls up here. The finishing adjustments down here, these are things I basically never use. Toning is to emulate the use of things like warm tone paper or color toners like sepia toner and such. The problem is the ones that are built into this, they're ugly. Like here, look at the sepia tone one. I think that's a little bit too strong, especially the way that it takes the white tones and darkens them down and colors them. A real sepia toner used in the darkroom doesn't really affect the lights that much. It mostly affects the midtones and the darks, and so this gives kind of an unnatural look to me. It makes it look like the picture's been soaked in a dye instead of actually toned. Now we look at some of these other ones here. I think they're just kind of overdone or unnatural. I mean, who wants a purple picture like that? That's ugly. That's my opinion. You may feel differently, but I don't like it. The copper toning one on the lowest setting, the number 16, actually that does look kind of cool. I do like that one. But most of these I think are kind of ugly. Or they're designed to emulate something like cyanotypes, which is an alternative process that is a historic process you can do that gives a blue picture. I mean, it looks like a cyanotype, but I don't like to do the digital emulations and stuff like that. The whole thing with cyanotypes is they're a handmade picture. You mix up chemicals, you spread the light-sensitive chemicals on a piece of fine art paper, like watercolor paper, and then you make prints on it. So it's something that's really more handmade than most photographs where you're using, store-bought paper and such. I don't think that looks good to do that in digital. I think if you want to do something like cyanotype, you should do it the honest way and actually do it with film and with handmade emulsion and stuff in the darkroom. That's my own personal preference, though. But if you're interested in doing that, it's offered here. The selenium toner settings actually do look pretty close to what selenium toner in the darkroom looks like. So if you like that color added to your pictures, that's a good possibility, I guess. In addition to the toning stuff, and neutral is number one. If you choose the neutral setting, then you'll get no tone at all. It's just going to be neutral, black and white. Vignetting darkens the edges to some degree, and there's different settings here that you can try. I really don't like the effects of most of this stuff, but if you want to do that in your picture, I know this is very popular with portrait photographers and wedding photographers right now. So if that's something you want to do for that sort of thing, it's available in here. Burning the edges is also like that too. It does the same thing as the vignetting, but it's a little bit stronger. Image borders. Image borders let you do things like this, which is imitating a film edge. When I was in art school back in the late 1990s, there was a huge trend of people who were printing 35mm negatives in the darkroom, and what they would do is they would take the negative carrier that came with the enlarger, and the negative carrier is basically it's a flat piece of metal with a rectangle cut in the middle of it that's the size of a 35mm film frame, and there's another piece of metal that's on top of it that's hinged to it, so you open it up, you put the negative in, close the hinge, and the negative is held flat inside this carrier with the metal opening, allowing the image to show through so that it can be printed. You put that in the enlarger. Well, what they were doing was they were taking these negative carriers and they were filing out the inside of the opening so that it was a little bit bigger than an actual image area, so you could see the black border around the frame on the film. And some of them would actually file them out so far that you could see the sprocket holes as well. And that was a huge trend in the late 90s. All the fashion magazines were printing pictures that were done that way. Even some news magazines were doing photojournalism printed that way. And even though it's kind of fallen by the wayside, even among film photographers, there are people in the digital world that still do that. And you can actually buy plugins that are specifically for adding those kind of borders. And they add a lot more choices than the software gives you here. But if you want to do that, there are a number of different borders you can scroll through here that give different looks like that. This just being a plain black border, or a plain white border if you want, like the old-fashioned pictures that the photo labs used to give with a little white border around them. I always leave that turned off. I don't like any of that stuff. It looks gimmicky and it's not my way. But if it's something you're interested in, it's there for you. So yeah, that's all the main controls in Silver Efex Pro. So once we've got the picture looking pretty much the way we want, and I like this one, let's go ahead and click OK. Wait for it to do its thing. One thing that's nice about the Nik software is it actually does the conversion on a separate layer above the color picture. And so the original color picture is never actually changed. And we'll see what that means when it finishes this here. It's kind of slow with all the different steps it has to go through to give us our finished image. There we go. Now if you look in the layers palette here in Photoshop, you'll see the background layer is our original picture, and then above that is the Silver Efex Pro 2 layer, which is our black and white conversion. You can click the little eyeball next to it and turn it off and see the original color and switch back and forth to see. Now you notice my color picture is actually lower in contrast than the black and white. That's because in color you can get away with using lower contrast because contrast between light and dark are not as important in color as they are in black and white. In color, contrast between different colors is what's important, and so the contrast between the yellow sunflowers and the green leaves that form most of the background in the picture is what makes the picture work. In black and white, you need a lot of contrast between different shades of gray, and so that's why the black and white version, in order to look nice, is going to be higher in contrast. So you can save the picture like that and have both the color and black and white one in the same file if you wish. Or if you decide you don't like it at all, once you finish it and you look at it, you might say, "Oh, this is terrible. I don't like the way it looks. Maybe I'll rerun the software again and use different settings." No problem. You can either turn it off, go back to the background, go back to running the software again. You can actually pile up multiple layers of these using different settings and then go through them and look at them one at a time and see which ones you like best if you want to do that. Or you could even say, I don't want to do black and white conversion at all. Maybe I like it better as color, and just delete the layer, which it did not do like it's supposed to. Here we go. There we go. So I'm going to undo that. So I want to keep the layer. Now, once you've got it in Photoshop, then you can do some other things to it too that you might want to do. If you want to do the color toning like we looked at in the Nik software. If you want to have a little bit more control over your toning, you can go into Photoshop's adjustment layers, and actually to do this we need to have the Silver Efex Pro 2 layer selected. But you can do an adjustment layer for something like hue and saturation is a good one for colorizing a black and white picture. Now we don't really want to colorize it, we just want to add a little bit of a color tone to it. But we have to click the colorize button right here, and you'll see the picture turns really red. And that's because the saturation is turned real high. You can turn it down to where it's mostly a black and white picture with a very little bit of a tint to it, or you can turn it up ridiculously high. And then the hue control is the color of the tone that you're going to get. So you can do something like this, which is kind of in the orange range, gives you, if you turn the saturation down a bit, kind of a slight warm tone. You can turn it up higher for a stronger warm tone, more of a sepia tone. Now I like this sepia tone better than the one that was given in the Nik software because it doesn't affect it doesn't stay in the sky the way that the Nik one did. Now there is some tone imparted to the sky because the sky is not pure white. It does have some tone to it, but it doesn't have that real dark stained look that the Nik software gave, and I didn't like that. But you can scroll through the whole range of hues and choose different colors and adjust the saturation. Now I don't think anybody would want a black and white picture with a green tone. That's pretty ugly. But if you do something kind of in the slight purple range, that's similar to selenium toning. Something in the orangish or reddish range gives you more of a sepia tone or warm tone look. Just by adjusting the hue, which is the color, and the saturation level, you can give a color toning to it. Or if you decide you don't like it, you can delete the layer. If you need help with adjustment layers like this, I have a separate tutorial on adjustment layers that shows just how Photoshop's adjustment layers work and what they do. They're basically a way of letting you do adjustments to a picture non-destructively. Because the adjustment is done on a layer above the image, the original image is never altered, and so you can go back later and delete the layer or make alterations to it without affecting your original image. But I do have an adjustment layers tutorial on YouTube and on my website crawfordphotoschool.com, which has a written version of the adjustment layers tutorial. But yeah, that's Nik Silver Efex Pro, and that's still, even though Google has basically announced that they're going to abandon the software, it's one of the best black and white conversion tools available. There's some other ones out there. Alien Skin Exposure is a good one, but it's very expensive. It's about $150. DxO Film Pack, I never really liked that one very much. I don't like the tonality I got out of it, and it's fairly expensive too. Topaz Black and White Effects too is very good too. That's one that I use quite a lot. It's not as easy to use as the Nik software, but I'm going to do a tutorial on it later. It's a little less intuitive, but I like the results it gives. And it's fairly inexpensive. It's about $50. So anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial, and check out more of my videos on YouTube and my written tutorials on CrawfordPhotoschool.com. Thank you.